and Columbus has been really a great city to host this event here.
Well, speaking of a great team, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention a very touching and fitting tribute that you did to your partner and friend Jim Lorimer last night right here on this stage. Standing ovation by the crowd. Can't say enough about Jim Lorimer. I mean, you guys just go way back. I was telling him the story just before you came about how that kind of took place back in 1970 when you were a competitor, competing and winning the Mr. World competition. And as a side note to that, a lot of people don't know this, but you just competed just 48 hours ahead of that in Europe.
24 hours.
24 hours.
Not for 24 hours. On Saturday night, I won the Mr. Universe contest in London. And on Sunday night was the Mr. World competition here in Columbus. And so we tried to figure out, how do we do that? Because there was no night flight out of London to New York or Chicago or something like that. So we had to wait until the next morning. And so we waited until the next morning. The first flight was like at 10 o'clock. So we arrived in New York, let's say at 12, 1 o'clock with the time change. But how do we now get the flight? It comes here before 4 o'clock when the pre-charging starts in the afternoon. So we told Jim Lorimer, I said, look, it just doesn't work. We cannot make it. And he says, well, I will make it happen. I said, how? He says, well, maybe we'll get a private jet. Now you have to understand, the day to get a private jet is very easy if you have the money. But in those days, no one had a private jet. But Jim Lorimer found a private jet. And he found the private jet was owned by Volkswagen. They were one of their corporate offices here. And so he got the jet from Volkswagen and he leased it from them. They picked us up in New York when we arrived in New York and flew us to Columbus. And they picked us up, and I remember with the sirens and the whole thing, we went from the airport to come into the town. We came backstage at the Veterans Memorial Auditorium, and there I saw Sergio Oliva and all the guys already pumping up. So we quickly, Franco and Dave Draper and those guys, we all ripped off our clothes quickly, slapped on a little bit of oil and started pumping up, and then all of a sudden they called us out. This is how tight the schedule was. I mean, think about it. So that's when, after, I won the competition, I went to Jim Lorimer and I said, Jim, I said, you and I, we have to become partners. I said, this is like unheard of, to be so well organized, to have us be able to get picked up with a private jet, come to Columbus, and then to compete here, and then the treatment that we got here, how well it was organized, and everything was just a straight 10. I said, we got to go and run competitions together. And he says, well, let me know when. And I said, when I retire. And so at that time, I did not know when I'm going to retire. So in 1975, I remember I called him before I went to South Africa to the Mr. Olympia competition, and I said, can you prepare a package that I can present to the International Federation of Bodybuilding, to the Congress in South Africa, and go and make a bid for the Mr. Olympia, because there will be others that wanted too. I remember Japan wanted it, Germany wanted it, there were other places in the Middle East that wanted it. So I said, I have to have a really great package. And he sent it to me. And then there it was in Johannesburg. I went to Pretoria where the Congress was, and I won the bid because of Jim Lorimer's package, because he had a letter from the mayor of Columbus, he had a letter of the governor of the state of Ohio, and he had from the fire marshal and this and that, and he had letters from the hotel that we have the rooms available, and we have the auditorium available, the Veterans Memorial Auditorium. All of this evidence was in that package, and no one else had that kind of proof. So of course it was easy for me to win the bid. And I got the bid, and then from 1976 we started promoting the Mr. Olympia and Mr. Universe competition right here in Columbus, Ohio. That's where our relationship started. But I just wanted to add, the weirdest thing is because at that time I did not know Jim Lorimer. I just knew that he was a business executive and he was vice president of Nationwide Insurance, and that he ran the world championships in weightlifting and in bodybuilding. But I didn't know anything else. So when I then came into town, he would say to me, he says, do you mind if we go quickly over to the city hall? in Worthington. And I said, what are we doing there? He says, well, you know, I'm a judge, and there's some cases there that I have to handle. And I said, you're a judge? What the hell? So we go over there, and now I'm sitting there in the courtroom, and he's the judge, and there's all these cases, traffic violations and other kind of violations and he's the judge. I had no idea that he's a judge. Then the next time then he explains to me, he says, well, automatically when you're the mayor of a town, you're also the judge. So I said, well, I did not know you're the mayor. The mayor of what? And he said, Worthington. I said, you never told me that. So then the next time I come into town, he says, can you come over to the university? He says, to talk to my students. I said, what do you mean, my students? What is that all about? And he says, well, I'm law professor at the university in Columbus. So I said, you're a law professor? He says, yeah, I write law books about insurance law. And I said, oh, Jesus Christ, what else do you do? And then I find out he was an FBI agent for years and years and years. And he worked undercover for many years, directly under J. Edgar Hoover. You know, and so you find out all of those things as you go on. I mean, he was just a really fascinating guy, very smart. And then one day he calls me, and he was up in Canada, you know, at this Shakespearean festival. I said, you into Shakespeare? And he says, oh yeah, I read everything about Shakespeare. I listen to all his plays and all the movies that have to do with Shakespeare. I'm a Shakespeare fanatic. So that's another discovery. So it's just one after the next thing. So he was just a really, really smart and talented guy, and became a really close friend of mine.
So 1975, you decide to retire. We all saw Pumping Iron, of course, a famous speech. And to that point, I mean, bodybuilding was your life. I mean, it was your ambition, your career. It was your dream to be Mr. Olympia, and you did it 6 times. Then you put on the promoter hat. How did it feel the next year to not be competing? Because that was the first year you hadn't competed since you started competing. Did it feel weird? Was it strange to not be competing and promoting?
No, not at all, because I mean, for me, that was it. I've done everything that I could do, and I felt that I was not as happy when I won the Mr. Olympia the 6th time as maybe some of the other competitors would have been. And so I felt kind of, you know, I got to go on to a new challenge. And my new challenge was acting. I wanted to not continue winning on this side here. I wanted to deprive myself of any victory until I make it in acting. And at the same time, I wanted to promote the sport of bodybuilding. So I was delighted. I was so happy that we were able to promote the Mr. Olympia in 1976 and to prove to the IFBB that we don't have to just give out $1,000 for the Mr. Olympia victory, but they'd be up to $5,000. And then the second year to $10,000, then to $20,000. And then we upped it and upped it and upped it, because that's why I wanted to get into this. I wanted to really show that we have to build the sport of bodybuilding, create respect for the sport of bodybuilding, make sure that we really advertise and promote and publicize the sport of bodybuilding. We hired publicity people to promote it because, you know, Wheeler was not into any of that. And so we went out and we started really trying to popularize bodybuilding in a big way. And then through the book Pumping Iron and then through the movie Pumping Iron, we were able to break through and to really make a big kind of like explosion in the sport of bodybuilding. So I was very happy that I was there promoting those world championships year after year after year, until the IFBB basically took it away from me and took it to Australia in 1980. And then in 1981, they gave it back to us, and then they took it away again. And then eventually we just decided, I said, why are we always worrying about the Mr. Olympia and Mr. Universe? Why don't we just create the Arnold Classic? That's what we did it from 1989 on. And this year we celebrated the 35th anniversary of the Arnold Classic.